How does a tiny California BBQ stand morph into a global titan? Let's get right into this explainer.
$26 billion. That is the staggering amount of revenue this corporation pulls in every single year. It's one of the largest private employers on the planet and an absolute juggernaut of modern business. But to really understand how a company scales to $26 billion annually, we have to look back at its fiercely optimized, incredibly professional beginnings.
Section 1. The Speedee Service System, from barbecue to assembly line.
To see where all this started, picture this. It's 1940 in San Bernardino, California. Brothers Dick and Mac McDonald are running a pretty standard car hop-style drive-in focused almost entirely on barbecue. It was actually really successful. But by 1948, they realized the vast majority of their profits were just coming from hamburgers, so they took a massive, calculated risk. They completely shut down their profitable business for 3 whole months just to overhaul their operating model from the ground up.
When they finally reopened, they had stripped away all the extensive barbecue options and came back with a hyper-focused 9-item menu. The anchor? A 15-cent hamburger. That was flanked by cheeseburgers, soft drinks, milk, coffee, potato chips, and a slice of pie. It was raw efficiency. Oh, and by the way, those famous French fries and triple-thick milkshakes we all know today? Those didn't even make it onto the menu until 1949.
They called this highly mechanical approach the Speedee Service System. Step 1 was strictly limiting that menu to speed up preparation. Step 2 was implementing literal factory line efficiency in the kitchen. To get this right, they actually went out to a tennis court, drew the exact measurements of their kitchen equipment in chalk, and mapped out the precise choreography of the workers. Step 3, design the physical space to discourage lingering. Architect Stanley Clark Meston designed this gleaming red and white tile building featuring angled seating so customers would have to lean over their food, reduced heating, and even cone-shaped cups that physically forced people to hold their drinks. Rapid customer turnover was the ultimate goal here.
Section 2. The Kroc Takeover. The Franchise Visionary.
Enter Ray Kroc. It's 1954, and Kroc is a 52-year-old salesman peddling multi-mixer milkshake machines. He visited the San Bernardino stand simply because the brothers were using 8 of his machines, and he was absolutely blown away by the volume of business they were doing. But their visions for the future couldn't have been more different. The brothers were perfectly content with their regional West Coast success. They actually feared their self-service model would fail in colder climates. Kroc, on the other hand, saw a massive national empire. He envisioned over 1,000 U.S. locations and made an aggressive pitch to take over as their franchising agent.
Kroc heads back to the Midwest and opens his very first franchised restaurant in Des Plaines, Illinois on April 15, 1955. At the end of day 1, the tills brought in $366.12. By 1960, the restaurants were grossing $56 million annually. But ultimately, Kroc and the brothers fundamentally disagreed on where to take the company. So, in 1961, Kroc bought the McDonald brothers out entirely for $2.7 million, taking full control of the whole operation.
Section 3. A real estate empire, the Sonneborn model. Now, this leads us to the ultimate business plot twist. In 1956, a former finance executive named Harry J. Sonneborn had an incredible realization. The real money wasn't actually in the hamburgers. See, under the original model, Kroc and the brothers were only taking a tiny 0.5% of gross sales from the franchisees. Sonneborn's new strategy completely changed the game. McDonald's formed a separate company, Franchise Realty Corp., to procure land and sign mortgages. Then, they'd lease that real estate back to the franchisee with a massive 20 to 40% markup. By shifting the financial burden onto the franchisee while acting as the ultimate landlord, McDonald's created an incredibly stable, highly lucrative foundation. Get this, today, real estate makes up an astonishing 99% of the company's total assets. To put that into perspective, those property holdings represent roughly $37.7 billion on their balance sheet right now, driving 35% of their total annual gross revenue. It remains arguably the single most important financial decision in the company's entire history.
Section 4. Iconic Menu Innovations, Adapting to the Market.
As the brand completely exploded throughout the 1960s and 70s, keeping the menu fresh was absolutely crucial. But here's the thing. The 1965 Filet-O-Fish, the 1968 Big Mac, the 73 Quarter Pounder, the 75 Egg McMuffin, The '83 Chicken McNuggets, all the way down to the 1995 McFlurry, these legendary items were not cooked up by executives sitting in some corporate boardroom in Illinois.
Nope, they were driven by franchisee ingenuity. These massive hits were grassroots solutions to local market demands. Take Cincinnati franchisee Lou Groen, for example. He invented the Filet-O-Fish because his restaurant was in a heavily Catholic neighborhood, and he was losing a ton of business on Fridays when his customers abstained from meat. Jim Delegati in Pittsburgh created the Big Mac. Herb Peterson in Santa Barbara created the Egg McMuffin. And Ron McClellan, a franchisee up in Canada, invented the McFlurry. The corporate structure was brilliant enough to let local operators innovate on the ground, and then they'd scale those winning ideas nationally. Section 5. Global Expansion. Conquering the World.
Remember Ray Kroc's original vision of 1,000 U.S. stores? Yeah, that was quickly shattered by some incredibly aggressive international ambitions. The pace was just blistering. Starting in 1967 in Canada and Puerto Rico, they rapidly jumped to Japan, Germany, Australia, and the Netherlands by 1971. In 1976, they successfully expanded into New Zealand, which is actually pretty ironic considering Kroc had previously visited the country and dismissed it as a dead-than-alive hole. But clearly the global appetite for American fast food was unstoppable. By 1979, they were opening up in Singapore and Brazil. Their cultural penetration was unparalleled. I mean, look at January 1990. McDonald's opens its very first location in Moscow, right in Pushkin Square. On day one alone, they served over 30,000 customers. It was a staggering symbol of globalization and a massive logistical triumph for the company.
Which brings us to the modern reality. McDonald's now operates well over 36,000 restaurants, spread across more than 100 countries. It is quite literally a masterclass in scaling a massive operation while somehow maintaining a rigid standard of service and total real estate dominance.
So, I'll leave you with this provocative question to ponder. Based on everything we've unpacked today, is McDonald's ultimately a masterclass in culinary consistency, or is it actually the greatest real estate empire ever built? I really want to know what you think, so drop your thoughts in the comments down below. It heavily boosts the algorithm and helps keep these professional deep dive explainers coming your way. Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.